He only wanted a quiet weekend at home, a place he had worked hard to create for himself. But peace doesn't always survive when prejudice comes knocking. Out of nowhere, a neighbor decided she had the right to take what wasn't hers, fueling her arrogance with rules that never existed and an authority she never had. What started as a simple disagreement over a pool spiraled into an act of defiance so stunning it left police swarming the scene. The question is, how far would you go when dignity is on the line? Marcus was proud of the life he had built. After years of long hours and sacrifice, he finally owned a modest home in a quiet neighborhood, a space he could call his own. For him, the backyard pool wasn't just water and concrete. It was a symbol of accomplishment, a place where friends gathered in the summer, where nieces and nephews splashed with unrestrained joy. It was more than property. It was peace. Neighbors often glanced over the fence, sometimes curious, sometimes envious, but Marcus didn't mind. He kept to himself, waved politely, and tried to believe that respect would earn respect in return. Yet beneath the manicured lawns and polite smiles there were whispers, moments that didn't sit right. A lingering stare, a muttered comment. A letter slipped into his mailbox reminding residents of standards meant for someone else. Still, Marcus brushed it off. This was supposed to be his safe haven, his proof that he belonged, but on one sweltering Saturday morning, that illusion cracked. A woman notorious in the community for her sharp tongue and self-appointed authority marched toward his gate with a demand that was as absurd as it was insulting. Marcus didn't know it yet, but this confrontation would not only test his patience, it would force him to draw a line that no one expected him to cross. At first, Marcus thought he had misheard her. Surely no one would walk up to another person's home and demand to use their private pool. But there she stood, arms crossed, chin lifted, her tone sharp and absolute. She called herself the voice of the neighborhood association. Though everyone knew her better by whispered nicknames, each less flattering than the last. To her, Marcus's hard-earned space wasn't really his. She insisted it belonged to the community, and on that day the community meant her own exclusive party. Marcus tried to remain calm. He explained, politely at first, that the pool wasn't available, that it wasn't up for negotiation. But her smirk only deepened, as if his refusal confirmed what she already believed, that he didn't belong there, that his voice carried no weight. Soon, whispers turned to open comments. She raised her voice, claiming Marcus was being unneighborly, that he was breaking some undefined rule by not submitting to her request. Others began to gather near the fence, some curious, some entertained, a few silently sympathetic, but unwilling to step forward. Each minute grew heavier as Marcus realized he wasn't just defending a pool, he was defending his place in the very neighborhood he had worked so hard to join. Then came the threats. She promised to report him to authorities, to the HOA board, to anyone who would listen. The irony was glaring. She was the one trespassing, yet she wielded age-old tactics of intimidation, certain her words carried more value than his. Marcus's heart pounded, but anger steadied his voice. He reminded her this was his property, his home, his sanctuary. Still, she pressed on, waving phantom rules like weapons, speaking louder, as though enough volume could drown out justice. To some, her rant was almost comical, but to Marcus, it wasn't a joke. It was a reminder of every time his voice, his rights, had been dismissed under the weight of arrogance and bias. As the sun climbed higher, sweat beaded on both of them, but neither backed down. Behind her, the growing audience shifted, uneasy. Some finally whispered among themselves, was she going too far? Yet no one stepped in. Their silence spoke volumes. It was then Marcus understood. This wasn't just about one confrontation. Her hostility carried the weight of a history he knew all too well. Rules bent against him, laws applied unevenly, respect demanded but rarely given, and if he yielded now, he feared the message it would send. So he made a choice, not to withdraw, not to plead, but to act decisively in a way that would make her threats meaningless. A plan formed, one that would stun his antagonist, silence the gawkers, and reclaim his dignity. But Marcus also knew a choice like this would bring consequences, and sure enough, what he set into motion would soon lead to flashing lights, a swarm of authorities, and a scene his neighborhood wouldn't forget. The only question was, would this act of defiance finally expose the truth, or would it cost him more than he imagined? Marcus's decision was simple, but its impact shook the entire street. Instead of giving in to her relentless demands, instead of letting her dictate the boundaries of his own home, he walked to the control panel by the pool and pulled the lever. The drain roared to life. A rush of water tore downward, swirling away the hours of his hard work, the summers of joy, the sanctuary he had built. He emptied it, not because she was entitled to it, but because she wasn't. If she believed she held power here, Marcus would show her she had none. For a moment, silence clung to the air. The neighbors stood frozen, watching the shimmering water spiral into nothing. She gasped, her face twisted with outrage, the idea of a party slipping through her clenched fists like the water beneath her feet. The pool was gone, her imagined victory gone with it. But silence does not last long in the presence of bruised entitlement. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone, barking into it as if reciting lines she had practiced many times before. Her weapon wasn't control. Of the HOA, it wasn't authority. It was a number, 3 digits that, for people like her, felt like a shield. The bitter irony hung heavy. In draining his pool, Marcus had reclaimed his dignity. But within minutes, flashing red and blue cut across the neighborhood. Voices shouted through radios. Curious neighbors lifted phones high, recording every second. He wasn't the threat, yet he was the one surrounded, his rightful stand distorted into suspicion. The weight of centuries pressed into the moment. One man on his property, cornered by the very system meant to protect. His chest tightened, but his stance didn't falter. He looked at the woman, still sneering, still twisting the story to fit her comfort, and he realized the truth. This wasn't merely about a pool, or even about one confrontation. This was about power, prejudice, and the cost of defiance, and in that instant, with the world watching, Marcus knew the real battle was only beginning. The police arrived, their lights flashing across Marcus's front yard like some twisted spotlight. For long minutes, he stood with his hands visible, his voice steady, explaining what had happened. Property lines, false accusations, the simple fact that he had done nothing but protect what was his. Neighbors shuffled nervously, cameras still pointed, their silence a chorus that spoke louder than words. And there she was, weaving her story, casting herself as the victim, while Marcus, the homeowner, was treated as the suspect. Eventually, the officers found no crime, no violation, no reason to act on her demands. Marcus breathed, slightly, but the damage ran deeper, because everyone watching had seen the way he was sized up before he ever said a word. They witnessed how her call carried weight, while his dignity hung in the balance. In the days that followed, the pool lay empty, but the lesson filled every corner of Marcus's mind. He realized that some battles aren't about winning in the moment. They're about refusing to be erased, about standing firm when the odds are tilted against you. His act of defiance wasn't just for himself, it became a mirror, forcing his neighbors to confront the silence they lived in, the injustices they ignored until they played out in their own backyard. And that's the truth stories like this reveal. Racism isn't always hidden in history books or headlines. Sometimes it's standing at your gate, demanding what isn't theirs. The question isn't whether it will appear again, it's who will have the courage to confront it. So ask yourself, when faced with a choice between silence and defiance, which side will you stand on?